Welcome everyone. We are excited for everyone to join us today. We will give everybody just a few minutes to go ahead and jump in live, and then we will get started in our controversial debate for the future of technology and maintenance. We are ready to go. Paul, Chris, you ready?
Sure. Let's be controversial.
It's great. It's going to be a great time. We will give everyone just another minute, and then we will go ahead and get started. Got a full hour ahead of us of some great debatable questions about AI and maintenance. Give everybody just another minute and we'll get started. All right, I am going to begin because we've got a lot to talk about and a lot of ideas to share. So welcome to today's debate. My name is Jennifer Carter, and I'm the founder of JMC Multifamily Consulting. I'm offering fractional marketing and consulting services to our multifamily industry. And really, over the next hour, we're going to immerse ourselves in the dynamic realm of artificial intelligence, AI, and technology within the context of maintenance and multifamily. So as we all know, in the era of technology enhancements, we're redefining the boundaries of efficiency and innovation, the integration rather of AI and the cutting edge of technologies. We are looking at, maintenance practices that stands as a pivotal force in revolutionizing maintenance in multifamily. And really, the fundamental question before us today is, how does the integration of AI and technology reshape the maintenance strategies within multifamily? And what implications does it hold really for our industry, over the next several years, and actually really to this year, most important. So we're really going to go in true discourse service here as a platform to unveil and unravel the AI maintenance solutions. We're going to be true debate form. So we want to really explore the benefits and challenges between Chris and Paul. They have two very different perspectives, and we want to really dig into those perspectives here. So quick reminder, throughout the hour, we are open and soliciting questions. So please put them in the chat. We will pick those up, and Paul and Chris are willing to answer those. So please use the chat box, and we will pick up those questions at the end. All right, so without further ado and great anticipation, let's kick off this debate. And I'm going to first toss it over to Chris. So if you wouldn't mind, would you please kick us off with our time together with a little intro about yourself, your experience in maintenance and multifamily, and ultimately why you're ready for the debate today.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here today and having this much needed, timely debate. My name is Chris Caramanica. I'm Director of Facilities for WinnCompanies. I oversee a maintenance portfolio of about 65 assets, a little over 8,000 units in the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And I've been in the multifamily industry about 15 years now, but in facilities for over 25. So, coming from a commercial background and going into multifamily, I think it is very, we all have that story. And, seeing the leaps and bounds and changes in maintenance over the last few years, and specifically with the topic that we're discussing today, AI, is why I'm really excited. And I always like having a good argument with Paul Rhodes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul for a little bit more about himself.
Great.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm honored to be able to join you today. And I agree with you. It's always awesome to have a conversation with you and with Jennifer. My name's Paul Rhodes. I'm the manager of maintenance learning for Brookfield Residential. I also am the founder of Directional Maintenance Services, to where I've been in the multifamily industry for right about 30 years. I started when I was 2 years old, so I'm very, very young, and this gray hair I put on just for the camera today to seem more wise. I've worked all the sides of the industry from 11 years on site. Then I went to work for a supplier running their learning department. And then I ended up working for almost a decade for the National Apartment Association as their maintenance and safety instructor. up until the pandemic, where I came back to the operational side of things because, it was illegal to do face-to-face training. We had to do this, which it was at that point that I beginning to pay attention to technology and AI and seeing just the really, really fast adoption into this space, into using these tools that we have. And if I'm honest, beginning to develop a concern about it, which is why it's such a good time having a good, respectful disagreement with Chris.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So we are going to actually get started with our first question. And this is kind of stems from conversations and leading from you, Paul, of where your kind of concern comes from. I think, Chris, you've shared that you really are, let's say, for AI, right? You're full speed ahead from your perspective. And, I'd love to kind of hear and share with our listeners on your perspective of what is your reasoning for really being full speed ahead in terms of AI, right? When it comes to maintenance, why are you pro or for, right, AI in what you see in the field today?
Yeah, I think as multifamily professionals, if you've been in the industry long enough, you can remember the days of filling out work orders in triplicate on carbon paper. Probably dating myself. I used to do service tickets even 25 years ago. I was doing service tickets in the commercial facilities business in triplicate. I was doing work orders, purchase orders, filling out paper logs for purchase orders, and the technology wasn't there. We've seen in the last decade, technology really get more immersed in our business. We've seen organizations adopt, proper software to be able to expedite things like accounting, purchase orders, leases, things like that. Now what we're seeing is the next step, right, is utilizing things like AI and all of the tools that comes. I mean, AI is such a broad term that so many things can be filled in. But we're really starting to see it leaps and bounds every single day. I talked about the triplicate forms. The multifamily industry, we've always been behind. We've always been playing catch up. And it's to other industries, it's to partner industries like, commercial facilities. They were doing, computer work orders 10 years before we started doing it, right? They were doing predictive, analysis of downtime of equipment, and we're just starting to get there, So that's why we need to be all full speed ahead, because we have always, as an industry, gone, well, we'll let somebody else do it. Let's, why don't we just see if we can adopt their software and make it work for us, right? So it would be really nice if, as an industry, we got ahead of this for once, and we were the early adopters, and we were setting the gold standard for using these great tools to make everyone's lives easier. I'm going to definitely cover make lives easier, make workloads easier. But we need to stay ahead of it. And we need to jump in now and fix it as it goes along instead of waiting for it to be perfect. Because by the time it's perfect, something else is going to come. And we're going to be like, hey, we just adopted AI. And the year is going to be 2035. And it's going to be something completely different, right? The other thing is, the other reason for full speed ahead, and we're going to cover a lot of them hopefully today, is predictive maintenance versus preventive maintenance. So preventive maintenance is something that facility managers and on-site maintenance professionals have been trying to do for years. Preventive, go through the paper checklist, get everything done. What I'd like to see our industry go to is predictive maintenance, and using something like artificial intelligence will help predict failures instead of a maintenance operator, a maintenance professional going, you know what, I think those water heaters are going to go next year. We've had a lot more water heaters go. We did like 4 last year and, 2 the year before that. Like, we might do 6, we might do 7 next year when it comes to budgeting purposes and actually doing it. But what if we were able to put all of this data into a system and it goes, no, Chris, we're pretty sure that you're going to do 15 water heaters next year. And here's all the reasons why. You're increasing, your work orders have increased, your service times on those units have increased, cost of goods is going up, the equipment is not being made as well as it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think in doing that, we're going to start seeing cost savings, but we're also going to be able to streamline our capital and budgeting processes for the professionals that do this every single day. It's one of the most daunting times. Imagine if you can cut your budgeting process or your forecasting process down to mere minutes instead of hours or days.
Yeah, that is really some great feedback and perspective on going full speed ahead for AI. I'm going to toss it over to you, Paul. Whether you agree or if you want to expand on that a little bit, I'd love to hear kind of what your thoughts are.
My thoughts are the fact that the genie's out of the bottle. AI is here. All that technology is present. It's a real thing. You can go on any LinkedIn, Tik, Insta, Faceagram thing, of which I am being drugged, kicking and screaming by my daughter onto those platforms, and they're present. It's here. The genie's out of the bottle. It's there, and I'm not denying that. And everything that Chris says is correct in that it is a good thing to come. My stance really and truly is being optimistically hesitant. Stress the hesitation. I like technology. I mean, I'm a nerd who one day wants to grow up and be a geek. I really, really do love technology. And since, the pandemic, we live behind a screen and behind a camera. My hesitation part, though, comes from the fact that as an industry, we're throwing millions and billions of dollars behind technology without really having a plan to develop our manpower. And that is at its crux my hesitation. Go figure. The guy who does training is all about developing the people. But my fear and really and truly boils down to someone like yourself, Chris, uses AI and you program into the ChatGPT or all of the other Watson or Bings or whatever it is, Bards or all of those services, and you do a scope for like a parking lot. You plug it in for it to generate a scope, and in 30 seconds, it spits back a scope to you. And Chris, you have the knowledge and the experience to look through that and pick out the pieces or parts that are good. The problem I have, or the real concern I have, is the second generation. What about we've trained our business habits to live off of that scope as adjusted by Chris, generation one, and yet Chris one day retires and goes live somewhere that every window he looks out of is sand. The person who comes behind Chris without that development now is lacking the experience to look at that output, and there wasn't anything in place to develop their experience to get that. And the last part of my hesitation really comes down to being a nerd. I mean, what science fiction movie have you ever seen that had AI involved that had a happy ending? So, Arnold Schwarzenegger, now he's doing other commercials. I don't want him to come back from the future.
I do appreciate your perspective, Paul. For sure. Although I can see that the wheels on Chris are spinning, and I do kind of want to hear exactly if you still kind of disagree with him. Do you agree? Like where is that line for you?
Yeah, Paul's got a point. I mean, he usually does. It's usually misguided. It's usually from I have some gray hairs too, Paul. It's not just you, brother. And we've gotten them in the field, right? We've been burned, right? We've we've trusted in technology, or we have trusted in knowledge or training of others. And, I get it. I get the optimistically hesitant, right? But at the same time, I have to be realistically confident, right? This is where we're going. Paul said it. The genie's out of the bottle, right? So what are you going to do? You can't put it back in. It is here, right? So we have to be able to embrace it. And Paul, I think you made a great point about generation, right? But at the same time, we can now teach others through these tools that we might not have before. As people used to come up in the maintenance industry, just in general, whether it was multifamily or general construction, they needed to learn from their father, right? Or their mother. They needed to be shoulder to shoulder with somebody, and they only learned from one person. They only learned as much as that person next to them knew, right? What if there were 50 fathers or 100 fathers? There's 1,000 Paul Rhodes, God forbid, out there that you are now data mining from not just the people you happen to work with at points in your career. You're data mining it from hundreds, thousands of experienced people. I do not think we are going to see generational knowledge lost. I think we're going to see generational knowledge gained, because that information is out there. I never would have thought we were going to have this conversation 4 years ago, right? I do think AI, I firmly believe that a bunch of those geeks that Paul was talking about earlier all sat in a room, and instead of being on Zoom calls, they were figuring out AI, and they did, and we're now seeing it more and more on a regular basis. And that's why we've seen the explosion over the last 2-3 years. It's changing weekly, and we got to stay up on top of it. And I really feel like we need to get on board with the industry. And I hear you, Paul. There has never been a dystopian future movie about AI that has ended well, right? But at the same time, like, we're going to be terminated. There's not going to be needs for us if somebody else is doing it better and faster and comes in to our space and tells you this is how you should do it now. So we should embrace it and just do it.
All right. I think we've maybe settled that one. I'm not sure. Maybe not.
We'll get back to it.
Actually, to your point, I think you're kind of making my argument for me, in that you're talking about two different things. You've got skills and knowledge. And on the knowledge side of it, that's AI. That's all in. The ability to go to AI now. You can see it on Amazon or whatever e-learning platform, and somebody can go in there and with a prompt create an entire book of how to charge with new refrigerants, how to solve a thermostat problem. They can write a book, publish it, put it out, and probably, with the way that electronic sales platforms go, make $1 million. Matter of fact, write that down, Chris. Maybe that's our retirement plan.
We know what we're doing immediately following this, right? How to book.
But that is knowledge. That's head knowledge. And to your point, you're exactly right. You and I we learned at the hip of somebody. Mm-hmm. We could be standing right next to them with that bathtub as they physically run the bead of caulking between the bathtub and the tile to get that perfect line, and experiment with, if you push too hard, you make it too wide, it doesn't work. There is that side-by-side, elbow-to-elbow labor knowledge, which, for the sake of this discussion, I'm calling skills. So you've got the knowledge, the head theoretical information, which that's what AI owns, and that's where we're at. But the second piece of it, which is my hesitation, is the skills part. The challenge we have is that back in the late 1980s, all shop class left public schools, to where, I mean, even pre-pandemic, I was standing in front of classrooms for people who were not in the apartment industry, in other words, the next generation. And it was astonishing to me that I had to actually teach students the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver. Something that these are adults, these are people who either are at the end of high school or into they're making the transition from being in school to being in a career, and they don't know that the difference between Phillips and flathead is one's a plus and one's a minus.
Okay,
so
I have to interject as so, because I do believe, and this is kind of coming, just hearing both of you. AI could also help write the SOPs on what tools that you need to bring, right? As in this field. And then also to, which I think kind of goes in the right respect for you, Chris, of using AI, right, to be able to create those SOPs or those work lines. But I also do feel like, Paul, I still to this day can't do caulking correctly. My finger just doesn't run right over that caulking correctly easy enough. So apparently I need a little more, a little more practice, right, from the learning. So I do hear both of you on both of your perspectives. For sure. I do need to kind of work on my execution on and I don't know if AI can do that for me personally, but that is one that I do need to work on. With that note though, Paul, I do have to ask the question, where, and I think you touched a little bit on it, but I'd love to kind of hear if there's other areas, where is the biggest improvement that you feel though that AI technology could bring to our properties and operations, right? Like we know the people aspect, but is there something there where AI could help, bring to our properties and operations?
Oh, I agree with Chris completely on the predictive maintenance side, to where if we gather the data, which that's another aspect which is challenging of this, is having our maintenance teams good at documenting or creating the data that is needed to produce the predictive models, to where if I have a building that's got a pump, that pump, I know that in this building prior, that pump lasted for 4.5 years. Well, then you have that put together with the entire industry data that goes into water temperature and building model and environmental conditions of the room, which changes that under normal circumstances, it lasts 4.5 years. But because of this other data that was inputted, we can expect this one to last 5 years and 3 months. So that means at 5 years and 2 months, I replace the pump and do it. That, I think, is where AI and technology can work. But we're not there yet. And I think my yet is farther out than Chris's yet in that place. That predictive model, I think, is fantastic. My yet is based on the fact that we're not even to preventive maintenance today. Right. I'm talking with maintenance directors around the country that go to a property manager, go to a regional and say, hey, we need to do just the basics of preventive maintenance. Right. Get in more than once a year and replace the air conditioning filter. Check the aerators, look for drips, actually do a unit inspection. And these the maintenance directors, the heads of maintenance, go to the property manager or the owner, and both of them say, wait, why are we going to do that when it's not broken? I mean, it's working now. Why should I spend money before it breaks? I mean, the argument is still, you brought up water heaters. The argument is still where you have a garden style community, you've got water heaters on the 3rd floor that are 15 years old, and maintenance is saying, hey, they're 15 years old, they're like nearing the end of their life. The response I've had from owners say, yeah, but it's not broken now. And if it breaks, insurance will cover the cost.
Well, I think Chris is going to rebuttal very quickly. I think he's got something.
No, I firmly agree with Paul, unfortunately, because I too have had those same conversations as recently as, I don't know, what time is it? It's, 1:25 Eastern. And I think I had a very similar conversation this morning, unfortunately. But I think my rebuttal, is twofold. And Paul, and I love you to death. I think we only know what we know. We're being a little myopic when it comes to skill versus knowledge. And I agree with you on that, right? But one of the things that we're seeing in the industry and our expectations of maintenance supervisors, maintenance technicians, regional managers, directors, right, is more and more of the admin, right? Mm-hmm. So as we have that expectation of those folks doing a lot more administrative work, that's where the skill is getting lost, right? So you can't do shoulder to shoulder training if you're sitting behind a computer 2 hours a day, writing a scope of work or closing out work orders or planning preventative maintenance. So we're losing that shoulder to shoulder training that what we could be doing is, utilizing tools and resources with AI to shift some of the knowledge stuff back to skill.
Well, and there, I think you're, again, kind of making my argument in that.
Are you just going to say that after everything that I say? Because I don't think I'm going to.
Well, yeah, because you are. That, to me, what you've described is not an AI need. There, you've described a manpower issue to where, yes, according to a McKinsey study recently, it says that 56% of employers can't find skilled labor. And for the first time ever, 66% of employees agree that they can't find skilled labor. So instead of trying to add to the skills of labor, we're actually freeing up the opposite end of the spectrum to where the people, the leaders that traditionally were able to handle that administrative burden and guide and train their people, we're taking the administration away because they have to work longer. Mm-hmm. And that means that we're not filling the bottom of the barrel. We're not filling the bottom of that funnel with new skills for that second generation. Instead, we're trying to solve the problem by taking what traditionally was the leader's responsibility of reviewing those scopes and doing that administrative work. We're taking that away because we're saying, no, instead of training new people to learn skills, we're going to continue to rely heavily on the more experienced people in their skills. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, the more experienced people are going to retire. I mean, according on a recent unrelated research I was doing, the average age for maintenance workers is 6 years older than the average age of all workers. So what that tells me is that we are not replacing ourselves fast enough to where eventually people with the gray hair like you and I are going to age out. And if we don't place emphasis on those skills, then eventually we're going to expect the robots to do the job of applying the caulking around that bathtub that we have. And
I just look at it different.
Technology is just not there yet.
I look at it different. I think that utilizing the technology frees up your existing skilled labor to train the new labor. And yes, we have workforce issues. We know that's not going away. Yeah. Right. But at the same time, if you could free me up as one person and I spent 2 hours less a week, that's 2 hours where I can impart my skill shoulder to shoulder in a training to keep fostering that and keep that going. So that person could eventually become me because they now have skill. They can use those AI tools. They can use predictive models. They could use automated work order systems or automated make ready, scheduling, things like that. That's what I want to see, right? As I think that we are leaned too much on, especially as you get up, Paul, as well as I do, as you get higher and higher up, it's less and less out in the field, right? I had one of my maintenance managers yesterday call me and said, hey, that boiler issue where the resident had no hot water? He was able to diagnose, walk them through, and fix a down water heater by 4 pictures they sent to him.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't those 4 pictures be run through a chat GPT style? Hey, what's wrong with this system? And somebody spits out and maybe it's not my regional, but maybe it's somebody else. It's a AI generated data that spits out, check this, check this, check this. And if these 3 things don't work, call somebody. Right. But it goes to my next point is, one of the biggest pieces that we have as a maintenance industry, in our industry for maintenance, is on call, right? There's always going to be somebody that needs to unclog a toilet. There's always going to be somebody that needs to come out and fix your water heater, your heater at night, right? That is not going away. It's never going to go away. AI is never going to just show up at my front door. Amazon isn't going to ring my front doorbell, walk in the house, and unclog my toilet. They're going to send somebody that knows how to do it, right? But what we could do is through, the things that I'm talking about here, using AI, automated call centers, where you can walk somebody through, shut the valve off the toilet. It's overflowing. This is what the valve is. This is where it is. Shut it off. Maintenance will be there tomorrow morning. And have that real-time interaction. Yes, it's computer-based, but sometimes with call centers, you don't even know if you're talking to a computer or if you're talking to a person anymore. And in doing that, saving some of our skilled maintenance labor, time, effort, sleep, will help us retain, help us, it will also help us recruit and, have less burnout. So those guys that have been doing it 10, 15 years that are like, I'm done. I'm going to go, work for the guy down the street. One of the biggest causes of burnout in our industry is on call. Because at some properties, you're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can get 20 calls in the course of a week. I was an on-site maintenance supervisor, right? And I started to burn out in 1 year. The guys that have been doing it for 20 years are a special breed.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that there's an opportunity there. There's, and that one big piece could be a game changer.
It could, and I agree with you. The on-call piece or on-call part of it is burnout inducing. I mean, each of us, we look forward to at the end of the day, shutting it down, the computer, the whatever we're working on, we look forward to at the end of the day, turning it off completely. And because you and I are, for the most part, not involved, we can confidently go have an adult beverage and not have to worry about going to a property or going to show up. My worry, though, my concern, though, is one, if we translate all of that out to a call center to where we begin to rely on our residents for that emergency labor, what we end up running into is kind of like our retail with self-checkout, to where we make our customers take the place of our labor, and we still haven't solved the labor problem. I think the solution to on-call goes around that preventive maintenance model. I mean, chances are, I know the properties I worked at, that I had 10, 20 calls a week we were not doing a good preventive maintenance program. We weren't fixing things before they broke. And we were relying on the fact that, hey, when that toilet backed up, if instead of not fixing things when the apartment was vacant, before somebody moves in, it works today, even though that flapper or the fill valve or the toilet is a little bit worn, but it's still good enough. We'll just let it ride. If we had more of a preventive mentality, we would decrease the amount of calls. And I mean, doctors today, they still have on call. Ambulance still has on call. It's a part of the job.
Before I share
No,
my...
hold on. No. Let me segue. I love a good segue. So I think that we beat this dead horse, which Paul and I have a tendency to do. We're no longer in the Terminator movies. We're in Groundhog's Day. So I'm going to completely change topic here. And Jennifer, I want to ask you, and what are you seeing from a vendor developer role in AI development implementation? Like, what is out there? You've heard Paul and I talking for 30 minutes, and going back and forth and toe to toe. And it's nice that I agree with him so much, but it's not true. What are you seeing on from a supplier developer?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that resident experience is still the number one goal, right? We want to make sure that residents are satisfied, right? And in that, but from the development and implementation, and this isn't planted, but honestly, I'm always a fan of human intelligence with AI, right? Like, they have to be co-piloted together, because I do see that there is value in bringing the predictive piece of AI, to your point, Chris, because that is going to help optimize our teams out there. It is going to help maybe even the folks that specialize in certain areas within maintenance, right? But again, you're never going to not have somebody, being able to do the work. But do I also think that generationally, we also have to think about the generations of types of residents that we have, right? And if we can have AI help our on-site team, our maintenance teams members, right? Ultimately helping our resident experience, hopefully helping increase renewals, right? Then we need to have a good, happy balance in that, right? Like we're here, we're using AI. I use it. I think there's a lot of value in it. But to my point earlier, like, AI is not going to come and caulk my tub for me, right? Like, I have to be able to do that, whether that is also a resident taking ownership and learning how to do that. Because I also think personally that this generation, younger than myself, would also just don't know what they don't know, right? And so you have to educate them, and we don't have the amount of people and that are available. How else are they going to learn, right? So we need that happy balance. To your comment, Paul, I learned from my dad. He's about to be 70 years old, but I am learning shoulder to shoulder. But there's also things, to be honest with you, he doesn't know, right? Because things are progressing so quickly, where AI can also help be that other person. So to me, I feel like we can't knock something off or disregard or stop training. We actually need to invest more in having a balance of AI and that human piece, right? To really create the best experience, the best culture for on-site team members, and ultimately for the residents. So that would be my take on having both. Although I do want to ask, or ask both of you. We do have a kind of a question coming in. I think it's a great one while we're talking about, and we were talking about kind of on call, right? From that perspective. Shelby here asks, why doesn't our industry run a second shift? So when residents come home and find issues, we can send someone out without utilizing on call. So, and I will preface this by also sharing, she says she finds so many people who are looking for part-time work in the second shift hour period, we could even charge an upcharge if someone wants to have their maintenance done in an early evening when they're home. I love the upcharge, by the way. That's a great idea. But I'll test that first to Chris. It kind of get your perspective on that second shift question there.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I'll tell you exactly why in a second we don't do it, and it's because of this right here. Right?
Can I have some? Can I have
no,
some?
This was literally all I have. You know, that's the only thing the wife would give me for my gag. But no, Shelby, your question is great, and I think that where it makes sense. I think we've seen as an industry, we are doing off shifting, we are changing schedules, we're having late workers, come in, but that's not the reality in a majority of our industry. A majority of multifamily communities are single person operations, 100 unit or less sites, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done before the sun rises, as they say. Garbage has to be taken out, things have to be cleaned. That person, you can't have a split shift, you can't have them work 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours at night. So it really is dependent on your community. It's dependent on your area. Some areas you don't want to be out past sunset. And I work in a lot of those markets. If anybody wants to hit me up on where I work, in the sectors that I work in, there are some places where I will not go after 5 p.m. But yeah, no, I think it was a great question. It really does. Unfortunately, as most things, it comes down to the money.
Yeah. Paul, would you agree or would you disagree on that one?
Yes, with some caveat. I think today in 2024, the second shift is much more realistic than it was pre-pandemic. And I recognize, I keep going back to that, but I think our industry has really got hit hard with that. And I'm not sure that culturally we as an industry have realized what the outcome. I don't know that we've done a good postmortem or an autopsy on what happened during the pandemic. And the reason why it comes up this way is today, remote work is a reality for our residents. Mm-hmm. And now we've got, I was at speaking at a conference here 6 months ago, talking about the importance of having a maintenance team that uses radios effectively as opposed to cell phones. And residents were complaining. One of the people in the audience was talking about residents complaining because they're working from home on Zoom, on whatever platform you happen to be on, WebEx, Revise, all of these platforms. And the radio goes off and the resident is interrupted. Their office is now in their apartment. Mm-hmm. So that means when I was on site, the majority of residents were gone. You go in, you do the work you're going to do, you write on the carbon paper that you brought up, Chris, for that going, and you leave the paper behind. Today, the majority or a plurality of our residents are home. And so if they're going to be home during the day, a lot of residents are now requesting, hey, could you come over after dinner when I'm not working and fix the whatever it is? So I think that second shift argument is closer to being a reality. But to your point, Chris, as a organization, our office hours are still essentially 9 to 5. That's our office hours. And not only that.
Hold on, Paul, I have to interrupt. Before I shift to our next question, because it's a good one, especially with the radios you're checking about. Just keep in mind, AI can help after dinner. Okay, yeah. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. Moving on to our next question to get
some help after dinner. Let's move to the next question, Jennifer.
Okay. So you mentioned radios, and all I can do is stare behind you, Chris, and see a nice make-ready board behind you, although there's no make-readies, but I do see the whiteboard behind you. So it does kind of lead into this question is, what is the definition of tech savvy for maintenance, right? We hear the word, this maintenance guy's not tech savvy. This maintenance doesn't know how to use an app. This maintenance guy can't push a button, right? All he knows how to do is some duct tape and, whatever, right?
No, all he knows how to do is he knows how to spackle a wall. He knows how to paint, and he knows how to, braze an air conditioning unit, and he knows how to solder copper pipe. But you know what? He can't use his phone, or he can't use a computer. So, Paul, I'm very passionate about this, but I'm going to this is one I know that we are going to agree on, just fair warning. But I'm going to let you go first because I had my tantrum. I'll let you go.
And we have had this conversation a couple of times, and this is one area where Chris and I are in complete agreement on. We've got to get our maintenance technicians forward, and this stops short of AI, although I think this is probably one area where I could see artificial intelligence coming from a workflow standpoint.
Right.
But there, I think the limitation is actually technology. But before I run that rabbit trail, yes, our technicians, we're still using a whiteboard in a majority of our offices. And why? Because they work. They're easy. You could pick up a dry erase marker, and anybody with zero amount of training can use that technology. And it's there, and it's great. However, now there are so many interfaces on this wonderful, lovely device that we all live with now and live on that could make that process so much easier with a very, very low barrier for entry. And so, yes, that technology, yes, we do. We need electronic make-ready boards and the make-ready process itself.
Yeah, so going back to, what you said, Paul, like I'm in 100% agreement with you. But, maintenance technicians, maintenance professionals, we didn't come out of the womb knowing how to plunge a toilet or change a water heater. We didn't know, right? Somebody had to teach us. We were talking about that earlier. And what I have found is an AI, and this is geared towards AI, right? We are not spending the time providing those skills when it comes to making somebody tech savvy. Well, they know how to do X, Y, and Z, but we don't have the time to teach them how to use a computer, so we're not going to hire them. And that is ridiculous. It's a tool. No, a computer or a phone is no different than every other tool in their toolbox. So why aren't we teaching them how to use it?
Correct. And to your point, Chris, I think the opportunity is there of using in those instances where we can automate possibly some of the pieces. Now, automation is different than artificial intelligence in the technology circles. So we could automate some of that administrative work for the 2 hours that you were referencing. And I think the piece that is missing from us is those 2 hours, instead of having our maintenance supervisor take those 2 hours and teach the younger skill, the more green technician. No, we're taking those 2 hours and throwing that supervisor at catching up on work orders. We're not using that time to do the training, to do that learning on whatever tool, whether it is on a cell phone or not.
All right. Well, speaking of cheap chat GPT and technology, let's ask this. We've got a last question, and then we'll get your final words on this topic. But the last official question is, honestly, from your position today, are you using AI? And if so, would you be able to share a little bit about that? And I will preface this disclaimer here. Product names are not to be considered an endorsement or of one product or another. This is purely your opinion in talking about what you guys are using currently around AI in your position. So Chris or Paul, who would like to take a
I want Paul to go first because I know what he's going to keep it really short for me for this one. So
yeah, I think Chris's answer is going to be yes, as much as possible.
Okay.
My answer is going to be the exact opposite of no, as little as possible. I use an editing app that helps writing when I'm writing content. it doesn't create, so it's not generative like ChatGPT or the other ones, but I use apps, I use technology that I know a part of that technology is artificial intelligence. But if there's an option to turn it off, I want all the bad ideas, I want them to be original. I want all the bad ideas to be mine. I don't want to have to come behind somebody else's bad idea and try and figure out how to either save it or throw it away. I want all the ideas to be mine from in between my head. So I turn as much of them off as possible. And I know at some time I'm not going to be able to turn them off because of the adoption rate and everything that's going on. So there's my answer. I try and stay away from it as much as possible.
All right, Chris, what you got? What's your opinion?
Well, here's the thing. I tell property managers I work with, regionals, maintenance technicians, I tell them all the same thing. If it takes you more than 5 minutes to do something and you're spending 2 hours or an hour on something when you could have called me and it would have taken 5 minutes to get an answer, why? Why are you spinning your wheels for an hour? That's an hour of your time. Your time is valuable. Our time is valuable. You could have sent me a text message. I go back to this water heater example yesterday. Like, they could have spent 3 days trying to figure out what's wrong with that water heater. They sent 4 pictures to a regional and he was able to quickly diagnose, give them the answer, and it got it working.
A human.
That's what I expect.
A human.
But you're wrong. And here's why. Because I have done that in my own life using these types of software since they've started to come out. So I've done it. Some of my regionals have done it. I used to spend hours on a scope of work, as did my property sites and my regionals, right? And I would always get 6 of the 10 things. And I would beat my head against, what did I forget? What did I forget? What am I missing, right? And then I would spend hours. I'd write the scope of work in 30 minutes. And then I'd spend a day fleshing it out and trying to remember, maybe calling somebody like Paul or somebody else I work with. Okay, I got 6 things. What are the 4 that I'm missing? What if I wrote one sentence into a chat GPT and says, write a scope to refinish a asphalt parking lot of 25,000 square feet? It is not going to miss the 10 things. This is where my skill comes in versus the knowledge, Paul, right? So I can look at that and I'm going to know what the differences are, but it saved me an immense amount of time. It really has. It's the same way when you're doing a repair. I'm sure we've all been there. You go to fix something and you're like, what am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? It's like putting together IKEA furniture and you have a screw left at the end, right? It's like, oh no, what did I missed a step.
It's
right?
Extra.
What if you plugged in, I have a down water heater. What's the proper way? Here's the make and model number. What's the proper, you don't have the book anymore. You can't find the manufacturer online. So here, this is what you would need to do. First, you need to valve it off. Then you need to cut this. Then you need to cut that. And, you can walk through that process. So that's why I'm a huge fan and why I think it's important, because it is saving time, but teaching at the same time. Going back to my repaving example, I'll never have to plug that in again. I've done it one and done, right? I now have a good scope of work that I just need to change some numbers on, and I've built, I'm adding to my existing toolkit. I've also used it for, I didn't use it for today because this was much more conversational, but I've used it for presentations. I've run through my content through presentations. I've run through generative AI to generate slides to, here's the information I'm presenting. Give me a cool visual that's going to resonate. I've used it for proofreading. Like you were saying, Paul, I used AI for proofreading, and it makes me sound a lot smarter than I am. So I'm going to keep using it.
All right. So we're going to wrap up. I want to get some final thoughts from both of you. You both have made some great statements, some great points. I think there's a lot for everybody on the call to think about, even for myself, on where I'm implementing. What does that balance look like? And so ultimately, Paul, we'll kick it to you first. What would be your last and final summary statement that you'd like to really make to the audience today regarding AI and maintenance and what the future looks like?
Well, to prepare for this, just because I know talking with Chris is it's an awesome thing, and I learn so much every time I talk to Chris. But in preparation, I picked up this little itty bitty, very, very fascinatingly wonderful book by Henry Kissinger and a couple other really, really smart people. And in it is a quote that really boils down. It says, information is not self-explanatory. It's context dependent. And really, my optimistically hesitation role is that context dependent part. Our industry right now, we are not replacing people with that context in order to apply it. So now, when a technological generation is less than 5 years due to Moore's Law and all those other things, that means that 5 years from now, if we are focusing on using AI only and we have a minimal amount of maintenance training or skills development opportunities, 5 years from now, when AI is used, when generative AI is used to do everything you're talking about, Chris, the people in the workforce that have to implement the output from AI will not have the context to use it correctly or use it effectively. That's my hesitation.
All right. I don't disagree, but I disagree. So, Bill Gates once said that we're changing the world with technology, right? So we need to change our industry. We have to, no offense, Paul, you've been doing this a long time, but we got to shed some of those. We have to shed some of those preconceived notions, some of those things that we've been carrying for years, or we're going to die. We're going to become extinct. Somebody's going to come back behind us and do it better and smarter. AI right now is focusing on reducing administrative and operations work, right? But it's also, if used correctly, in pairing with technology, in pairing with skills training, which I'm a huge fan of, it'll also reduce maintenance workload as well, especially with our diminishing workforce, because our workforce is not going to increase. What we need to do is we need to get more out of our existing workforce. I firmly believe we can do that with technology. Steve Jobs, as a counterpoint for all of you Apple folks, I didn't want you to think I was just going to quote Bill Gates. Steve Jobs said technology enough isn't alone. And he's right. And Paul, that's your point. Technology enough isn't alone. I agree. But, we need people in our organizations to put this in place and start using it, despite whatever drawbacks we might see in the short term, or we're going to be behind on the times. AI is not a way to save money, but it is a way to provide better service. And that is to our people, our residents, our clients, our owners, our lenders. And we need to be able to do that and champion and encourage the use of it for those kind of things that we were talking about today, that I was talking about today. So we're at the forefront of AI because it's still in its infancy stage, and not in 2035 when everybody else is doing it. We as an industry say, you know what, that AI thing, that they may have something there. We should start using it in the multifamily industry.
Yes. Did we get the final thoughts for everybody?
I think you got the final thoughts. What do you got, Jennifer? What's your final thought?
You both made some great argumentative points on both sides. So we've had some great feedback from folks. Appreciate everyone's comments as well. So please note that they are appreciated. This session is going to be available. You can come back in and listen to it. And if you give me just a second, I'm going to share my screen and we'll be all set. I'm going to share some contact information for you guys to pick up. You can contact Chris, Paul, and myself. And we appreciate your time here today. So thank you so much. As a matter of fact, the screen's not working on my screen sharing, but we will get it out to you so you can contact us all individually should you have any other questions, or to even share some of your opposing opinions to those. So thanks everybody for joining today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.